Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandradhara Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Chandradhara Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Prabhupada ki, Shri Caitanya ki, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki. Okay, go Caitanya. First of all, did somebody move my glasses? I put them on this chair and I can't seem to find them. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, sir. So today is it's not on the calendar that it's the day of Rath Yatra, but there's London Rath Yatra being held. So there's a little bit here about Rath Yatra we'll read. The chariot festival of Lord Jagannath and Lord Balaram and Lady Subhadra. Previously, it was only celebrated in Jagannath Puri, but by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples, this festival is now celebrated all over the world. On this day, Lord Jagannath comes out of his temple and gives his audience to everyone. Everyone can see him and offer some service by pulling his chariot and singing and dancing for his pleasure. During this procession, the deities of Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Lady Subhadra ride on their gigantic chariots. The festival begins from the second day of the bright fortnight of Asada during June, July. Can't always get that because sometimes people criticize, oh, you're not doing it on the actual day. You can get the Metropolitan Police to agree to do it on the day, then that's fine. They've got other things to manage as well, so better we have it on another day than not have it at all. And Lord Jagannath doesn't seem to mind because he's there. If he didn't want it to happen, he's Lord of the universe, then it wouldn't happen. So the deities are dragged onto huge carts. They say dragged onto huge carts because the deities in Jagannath Puri are so big that you can't just carry them. Sometimes you can see a video of this happening. They have ropes, these silk ropes, and they bounce them onto huge big cushions from one cushion to another, and then they have to drag them up onto the carts because they're so big, can't be lifted. These are dragged onto huge carts. This makes sense. The length of Grand Road in Puri from Jagannath Temple to Kanducha Temple. So the carts aren't the length of the road. There's written there. Anyway, the procession is along Grand Road of Puri to the Kanducha Temple. This is about 2 miles. The deities stay at Kanducha Temple for 9 days and return to the main temple on the 10th day. This is called Bahuda Yatra, Return Cart Festival. Anyone here been to Puri? And it's interesting. If you go to Jagannath Temple and you walk down Grand Road, you come to the Gandicha Temple. Not long ago, there was that pastime of Gandicha Marjanam, cleansing of the Gandicha Temple. This is done by Lord Caitanya and associates, and still done to this day, in preparation for the deities arriving. And just like, sometimes they have reserved car parking spaces, like maybe they have disabled car parking space reserved, or if, for the CEO of some company, they have a reserved space. So outside the Gandicha temple, they have huge, big reserved spaces for the chariots lined onto the road. And this is interesting because it gives you the consciousness, that Krishna is actually the focus of attention of everybody in that city of Puri. So even when the chariot festival is not going on, you walk by those big markings, and the chariots that we use in London and other countries of the world are big, but these ones are like, and so you can just imagine the space which is demarcated for these chariots. The ceremony symbolises Krishna going from Dwarka to Kurukshetra to meet the inhabitants of Vrindavan after a long separation. During the Ratha Yatra, the deities are taken care of by the Daityas, who are a class of temple servants. Are considered to be part of Jagannath's personal race. The Daityas said to have descended from Vishva Vasu, the first worshipper of Jagannath in his form of Nila Madhava. These servants take care of the deities during the Ratha Yatra festival and do not take part in the daily worship of the deities. Lord Jagannath's chariot is called Nandi Ghosh, whose sound gives bliss. It is 45 feet high and its charioteer is Matali. Lord Balaram's chariot is called Taladwaja. It is 47 feet high and is driven by Daruka. Lady Subhadra's chariot is called Devadalana or Darpadalana, who crushes pride. It is 43 feet high and its charioteer is Arjuna. There are side deities on each of the carts. New carts are made every year according to strict and ancient specification, and it takes thousands of devotees to pull them. The Pahandi, or procession of the deities from the temple to the carts, is the most colourful show of the festival. Before the Ratha Yatra begins, the chariots are brought in front of the Simadwar lion gate facing north. Balaam's chariot is closest to the gate, then Subhadra's, and then Lord Jagannath's. First, Sudarshan is brought from the temple and put on the chariot of Lady Subhadra. Then Balabhadra, Subhadra, and then Jagannath are placed on each of their carts. The deities are extremely heavy, and they take many strong men to move them step by step. Each deity has thick, soft ropes around their body. The Daityas move the deities, assisted by the pujaris who hold onto the ropes. The deities are wearing flower crowns when the deities are on the carts. Deities of Krishna and Rama are installed on Balaram's cart, and the deity of Madan Mohan is put on Jagannath's cart. The deities are then redressed and offered fresh garlands. At this time, the king of Puri arrives in a palanquin. The king then sweeps the street in front of the cart with a golden-handled broom and sprinkles the ground with scented water. The cart of Balaram goes first because he is the oldest member of the family, then Subhadra, and then Jagannath. Each cart has 4 ropes. There is no steering system for the carts. The chariots of Balaram and Subhadra go directly to the Gundicha temple. Jagannath stops at a temple along the way which belongs to his aunt, the goddess Adamsini, where he is offered fried cheesecakes. If a cart does not reach the Gundicha temple the first day, it is dragged on the next day, which is what usually happens. It takes over 4,000 people to pull the carts. When the deities reach the Gundicha temple, they rest on the chariots for another day and then are transferred to the sanctum of the Gundicha temple. So there's usually about 1 million people that attend this festival, they say. Okay, so can you just read from the CC? Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai.
Starting from text 3 and read until 18th, we can do together.
Okay. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just before we start, there's a nice story from Titikshu, which is about how Lord Jagannath arranged for 3 chariots in London. There used to just be one. It's actually on my phone, Raghunath. Can you pass my phone? It's just on my shoe outside. So for some time, they just used one chariot in the UK for Rath Yatra, and all the 3 deities were on that. And many places have just the one chariot. But this little story indicates, thank you, Lord Jagannath's will to engage more people in the service and to bestow more people with his darshan. So this is from Titikshu Prabhu, who's been serving Lord Jagannath for many years. So this is his words. We built Jagannath and Baladev's chariots in 2004. I was fortunate enough to have been invited to help build what is now Subhadra's chariot in 1982. This was used for all 3 deities until we got permission for 2 more in 2004. There's an interesting story about how that permission came about. In 2000, I was asked to manage the festival. Previously, from 1984, I had been looking after the chariot. So every year the chariot gets maintained, it gets repainted. We started fundraising for the festival that year, and to our surprise, we more than covered the expenses. The next year the same thing happened, and the next. I was beginning to wonder, what does Jagannath want? He's sending all this Lakshmi. So there was an accumulation of funds. Often it's a bit of a struggle to get the funds to put on the festival, but for a few years actually more funds was coming in than they know what to do with. Next year the Department of Culture, Media and Sport held a consultation meeting for all the users of Trafalgar Square. So this would be the London Council. They unveiled a model of the square with the top section joined to the National Gallery by a terrace. I thought to myself that this would be an ideal place for 3 chariots. Previously, the square was an island with 4 lanes of traffic on all sides, and we had to put the chariot next to Nelson's Column. Does anybody remember that, where it used to be down there? Where there would be no room for 3 chariots. The next thing that happened was that the police asked us to come for a meeting to discuss how many chariots we'd be having. How many chariots? This was very strange. Usually we had to approach them. For the previous 3 years, I had been joking with the police inspector about having 3 chariots on the plea that it would make the procession more manageable. Of course it wouldn't, but that was a running joke. because they were thinking more chariots, more chaos. And every year the inspector would say, no, there is too much chaos with one. I would never give permission for 3. So myself, my good friend Paramakruna, went to meet with the inspector. He asked, how many chariots are you having this year? I said, well, 1. He replied as if it was his own idea. I think you should have 3, because it will make the procession more manageable. We nearly fell off our chairs. So Jagannath set up the whole thing. He sent the funds arranged for Trafalgar Square to be remodelled to accept 3 chariots and changed the mind of the inspector. Jai Jagannath. Because anyone who had been to Trafalgar Square, that platform up at the top of it wasn't there at one time. So Lord Jagannath, quite interesting, he arranged for this idea to be percolating in the mind of the inspector and arranged for that whole thing to be built, and then the funds for to come, and then the 3 chariots are there. We used to also experience quite often that it would rain quite a lot before Rath Yatra, just like we were reading there, that the king of Orissa comes at the start of the procession and he sprinkles scented water on the ground and he sweeps in front of the chariot. So this is a tradition. Huh?
That's in the verses that we want to read.
All right, great. Okay, we'll come to the verse then. But sometimes this would happen, is that the demigods would wash the streets before Lord Jagannath's appearance on the street. Occasionally they'd wash it during the procession as well, but usually not. Okay, I'll just go through the verses myself then. Jaya Shrota Gana Shuna Kari Ekamana Ratha Yatraya Nritya Parabura Parama Mohana. All glories to the listeners of Sri Caitanya Charitamrta. Please hear the description of the dancing of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the Rath Yatra festival. His dancing is very enchanting. Please hear of it with great attention. Aradina Mahaprabhu Hana Savadana Ratri Uti Gana Sangi Kaila Prata Snana. The next day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his personal associates got up in the dark and attentively took their early morning baths. Andu Vijaya Deki Bari Karila Gamana Jagannatha Yatra Kaila Chadi Simhasana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his personal associates then went to see the ceremony of Pandu Vijay. During this ceremony, Lord Jagannath leaves his throne and gets up onto the car. Pani Prata Parudra Lana Patra Gana Mahaprabhu Gani Karaya Vijaya Darshana. King Prataparudra in person, as well as his entourage, allowed the Pandu Vijaya ceremony to be seen by all the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Advaita Nitai Adi Sangi Bhaktagana Sukhi Mahaprabhu Deki Ishvara Gamana. Nityananda Prabhu and others were very happy to observe how Lord Jagannath began Rath Yatra. Palishta Dayita Gana Yena Matahati Jagannatha Vijaya Karaya Kari Hatahati. The very strongly built Daitas, carriers of the Jagannath deity, were as powerful as drunken elephants. They manually carried Lord Jagannath from the throne to the car. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word Daita refers to one who has received the mercy of the Lord. So Daya means mercy. Lord Jagannath has a number of stalwart servants known as Daitas. These servants do not come from very high-class families, Brahmins, Kshatris, or Vaishyas, but because they are engaged in the service of the Lord, they have been elevated to a respected position. Thus, they are known as Daitas. These servants of Lord Jagannath take care of the Lord from the day of the Snan Yatra up to the time the Lord is carried from the throne to the Rath cart. In the Kshetra Mahatmya, these Daitas are said to have come from the Shabaras, a caste that keeps and sells pigs. However, Among the Dayatas, there are also many who come from the Brahmin caste. Those Dayatas coming from the Brahmin families are called Dayatapatis, or leaders of Dayatas. Dayatapatis offer food such as sweetmeats to Lord Jagannath during the Anavasara, the resting period after Snan Yatra. They also make the early morning offerings of sweetmeats daily. It is said that during the Anavasara, Lord Jagannath suffers from fever, and the Dayatapatis offer him an infusion of drugs represented by fruit juice. It is said that in the beginning, Lord Jagannath was worshipped by the Shabras and was known as the deity Nilamadeva. Later, when the deity was established in the temple, the Lord became known as Jagannath. Because the deities were taken from the Shabaras, all the Shabara devotees were elevated to the position of deities. Om Ganatamantasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshunlitamyana Tasmashi Gurve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagategrim Yatkipatamam Bande Shigurim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadigora Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Oh, 18, right. Well, we'll do this as well then. So it's interesting that he's known as Lord Jagannath because he's the Lord of the universe. He's not just the Lord of the Brahmins. He's not Brahmanath. He's the Lord of the universe. But although it's not that we actually can gain entrance into the temple, but it's considered that if you see the temple, you see the chakra on the dome of Lord Jagannath's temple, it's as good as seeing Lord Jagannath himself. So sometimes if we go to visit some of these temples and we're not allowed entrance, we might get a bit upset. But actually, we should remember Haridas Thakur, who was born in a Mohammedan family, and Lord Caitanya appointed him as Namacharya, the devotee who set the highest example, highest standard of chanting holy name. He used to chant 3 times 64 rounds a day. Has anyone ever chanted 64 rounds in one day? Can you imagine chanting 3 times 64 rounds? Perhaps you could do it one day, but to do it every day, you can't fake these things. And he was doing it every day. So although he was in such an elevated position, and if anybody should have been seeing Lord Jagannath gain entrance to the temple, it should have been him. But he humbly just accepted that I'm born in a low family, so in terms of the caste considerations, then he would just take his darshan of Lord Jagannath from outside the temple every day. So this is the standard for us, and unless and until we're getting admission in, then we should be satisfied with seeing Lord Jagannath when he comes out on the Rath Yatra festival. And this is actually very ecstatic for the devotees because they don't see him day in, day out. They see him on these occasions. Actually, so in many ways, we're more fortunate being in the West because we can see Jagannath in the Temple of London or many other temples every day. There's no one to bar us from that. So despite this traditional caste situation here, then these sabaras, so these keepers of pigs, then they're considered to be very, very low class. Not even Shudras are considered outcasts, untouchables. Back on the day, there was so much kind of caste snobbery that if the shadow of an outcast touched the body of a Brahmin, they would have to go and take bath again. This is the kind of level of superstition they had. So, of course, that's what you would maybe call fanaticism. But that's their choice. So anyway, the interesting thing is Lord Jagannath made himself, first of all, known to the king of the Sabaras, whose name was Vishwavasu. So just quickly, the story of how Jagannath came about was that this kind can't remember how it begins, but there was one tribal king who was the keeper of these hogs, and Shabaras they're called. And he, although he was a tribal king, he came across a deity of Krishna known as Nila Madhava. So Nila means blue, and we know that Krishna's colour is bluish, colour of a fresh blue rain cloud. So he was worshipping this deity, and Maharaj Indradyumna, he had a dream about this deity. The Lord appeared to him, and he sent his ministers and soldiers out. He sent his ministers out to find the whereabouts of this deity. And one of his ministers, one Brahmin called Vidyapati, he came across, and the Sabaras were actually very secretive about worshipping this deity of Lord Jagannath. They didn't want that this deity would be taken away from them. So they're very secretive. They wouldn't let anybody find out about it, just only the villagers. But this devotee, Brahmin devotee Vidyapati, he came across this village, and he seen that at a certain point in time in the day, the king of the Shabaras, he would take away flowers and fruits and things like that, and he'd head into the forest, head into the jungle. So he hung around for some time, and I'm just cutting the story short, there's many other things to it. But one day after some time, he fell in love with this Shabara king's daughter, and they got married, and they gained the trust. But he didn't just do this as a kind of political thing. You know, he'd actually did fall in love with the Shabara king's daughter. They got married. And then he gained the trust to the point where his wife petitioned her father, the king of the Shabaras, to allow Vidyapati to accompany him to do puja. So he did. After much arguing, then finally he allowed him to come. And so he was thinking, all the while, his mission was from Indradyumna Maharaj to find this deity and bring Maharaj to the deity, or bring the deity to the king. So he was visiting, and he seen this deity, and after some time visiting, then he decided that it's time that he should return to the king and tell him the whereabouts of the deity. So he was thinking, but how can I find it? It's a very complicated route to find to the forest. You know, it will be very difficult to find it. So he took with him a little bag of mustard seeds, and on the way to the location where the deity was in the jungle, he'd drop every now and again, he'd drop a mustard seed, so that in due course of time, the mustard seeds would grow and he'd be able to follow, I think it's a yellow flower they have, is it? They would be able to follow the trail of mustard seeds. So he did this, and he made some excuse that he had to go back to the king, and therefore he left the village. And when he left the village, there was a great storm which washed away so much erosion of the jungle, so this could never be found. And Vishvavasu, the king of the Sabaras, when he went to see Nilamadeva, then he was gone, and he was aggrieved to see no longer was the deity present for his darshan, and he was such a great devotee. So there's a drama that Tamal Krishna Maharaj arranged called the Jagannath Priyanatakam. If you get to hear this drama, it's a wonderful representation of this pastime of Lord Jagannath. So when Vidyapati came back with the king, then the Shabara king, he was very upset, and he blamed Vidyapati for being devious and for stealing the deity. But he didn't know anything about the deity going missing, so they were all at each other's throats about this. And this was creating some tension. It's part of Jagannath's Leela. But then it came to pass that, I can't remember who had the dream, but there was a log which was washed up on the shore. So Jagannath Puri is next to the ocean, and there was this big log was to be found, which would have the 4 symbols of Vishnu on it. And can anyone tell me the Sanskrit names for the 4 symbols of Vishnu? Shankha is
the function,
punch,
chakra, the disc, Gada, the
club,
main, Prana, the
lotus flower. Thank you. Top of the class. So these symbols were found in this log, which was washed up on the shore, but it was so heavy that it couldn't be lifted. And then Maharaj Indradyumna had a dream that he was to allow the Shabaras, the pig keepers, to assist in carrying and transporting this log. And as soon as they engaged in it, then the log would move. So this was showing Lord Nilamadeva, Lord Jagannath's will, that he didn't want these servants of his to be excluded from the worship, simply because they were outcasts. So the log was taken, and meanwhile there was a huge temple was built, but the the murtiwalas, or the carvers of the deities, they were finding that their chisels were all breaking. The wood was so hard that it couldn't actually be carved. So they were very frustrated. We need to get some better incense. It's terrible, that stuff. It's like burning tires or something. What goes on in the name of incense nowadays? So after many murtiwalas had tried to carve the deity, because there was instruction came to Maharaj Indradyumna that you should carve deities out of this, or you should carve a deity out of this log. So finally one Brahmin came and said, I'll carve this deity behind the locked door, but do not open the door until I'm finished carving. And if you open the door, then that's when I'll stop carving. So behind the closed door, they could hear chink, 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 chink for days. And then it would stop for a bit. And then they'd wonder, is he finished? And then it would start again. Actually, if somebody doesn't mind, they could take that incense thing and just put it outside, because it's giving me a bit of an asthma attack. Nothing in it? Okay. Thanks. Sorry for the inconvenience. So after many days, then the chink chink had stopped, and they were wondering if it was going to restart again. And so Maharaj Indradyumna was so devoted to Krishna, he was so impatient that he was thinking, I can't wait to see this deity, I can't wait to see him. So then he burst into the room, and the Murtiwala wasn't there, and the deities had no hands, they had no feet. And he was thinking, oh no. He says, I've just totally devastated the plan for having this deity of Krishna here. Now I've spoiled it because of my impatience. Why couldn't I just wait? I've totally spoiled it. But then it came to pass that this Murtiwala, who was carving the deities who no one else could carve, was actually Vishvakarma, the architect of the demigods. So he was actually the demigod architect who came and did this carving. And it wasn't by accident that the deities had no arms, had no legs. They had no hands, actually, and no feet. And this is a particular form of the Lord. So it was revealed to Maharaj Indradyumna, although he was really upset. He was thinking he was the one who spoiled it all. and he'd wasted the Lord's plan, etc. He was feeling very guilty about this. The Lord revealed to him that this is actually special forms of his. So does anybody know how Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra are in these forms?
How they got the forms in the first place.
Yeah.
Krishna was listening to his pastimes. I think he was speaking, and he became so absorbed in the advice to say, Balaram came along, and he said next to say, and then Subhadra came along, and she saw the timber, and she
That's it. That's it in a nutshell. So basically what it was is that Krishna loves to hear his devotees reciting his pastimes. It's not because he's like egotistic. It's like we like to hear the sound of our own name being glorified. But the pure version of this is such that the Lord is enthused, that his devotees are enthused about the loving dealings between him and his devotees. So he was walking by one building, I think it was in Dwarka, and he heard some devotees very enthusiastic describing the pastimes of Krishna and his devotees. And so Krishna became stunned and his eyes became very wide. This is some of the ecstatic symptoms. And then his limbs started to go within his body. So this is also Lord Caitanya experienced. Sometimes we have this thing called, or we don't have it, but there is this thing called sahajaism, where people try to portray themselves as being very advanced by like forcing some tears out of the eyes or rolling on the ground. And for everyone who knows better, this is rolling on the floor laughing at these people rolling on the ground. So they're rolling on the ground pretending, and we're rolling on the ground laughing. Just like when, who was it was pretending to be Vishnu again? Pondraka. So he sent a message to Krishna that you're a fake, I'm the real Vishnu, and meet me in battle and I'll dispatch with you. And so the Pandavas were thinking, this is very funny, this guy's such a joker. He doesn't realize this is Krishna, the Supreme Lord. So when they went there and they seen Pondraka, he had two fake Vishnu arms, and they said they were actually laughing so hard. I can't remember if it described they were rolling on the floor laughing, but it was to that effect that they just couldn't laugh for a considerable amount of time. That's exactly what it says. Which means they probably, you can just imagine, when you're laughing so much you can hardly breathe, seeing some joker in front of Krishna pretending he's Krishna. It's like you can imagine somebody showing up in the temple pretending they're Felix, wearing the same jumper, wearing the same tracksuit trousers under his dhoti, and saying, I'm the real Felix. I challenge Felix to a kirtan and see who leads the best kirtan. And then as soon as he opens his mouth, everybody's like laughing. We can't even, we know who the real Felix is. So you can just imagine, this is a little humour between ourselves. Imagine what it must have been like for the Pandavas when they seen someone pretending to be Krishna, when Krishna's standing beside them. So this sahajaism, sometimes people, they pretend that they're very advanced because they want some cheap following, but they can't pretend these ecstatic symptoms of incessant tears flowing from the eyes. What's that called? It's mentioned in the Gurvastakam. Gurvastakam. Romancha Kampashu Taranga Bhajo, isn't it? Incessant tears flowing from the eyes. Kampa Ashru, that's the one. And tears from the eyes, and sometimes they become stunned, and you can't tell whether the person is living or dead. And then the limbs enter into the body. So, and even Lord Caitanya, sometimes he was perspiring blood, like we perspire sweat. So these ecstatic symptoms, you cannot fake. So Lord Krishna, he was experiencing such ecstatic symptoms, hearing about the pastimes of his devotees. And then when Lord Balaram came along. He's saying, what's going on here? Krishna is like experiencing some ecstatic symptoms. His eyes are wide. His limbs have gone into his body. And then he hears it also, so the same happens to him. And then their sister, Subhadra, comes along and she hears the same. So this is how these deities came about. It was not some impatient interception of Maharaj Indradyumna, which caused the deities to be unfinished, but actually it was as the Lord desired. And then they were installed in the temple. And on the Rath Yatra festival, then the Shabaras, who are not normally engaged in the temple worship, they're allowed to come and make offerings to the deity on the chariot. They're given a special time and place to come and do that as recognised. In Jagannath Puri, the whole city is centred around Lord Jagannath, just like Trinabarvan is centred around serving Shri Kodnitai Pishashi, or at least that's what we're trying to do it. We're trying to give up being centred around ourselves and making Krishna the centre of attention. So there in Jagannath Puri, Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra are the centre of attention, and everybody has their duties. Sometimes their occupation is actually, like there's a group of devotees who actually have carved some deities for us, and his family service is to make the ropes for Jagannath. Jagannath Patra, his name is. There's a nice deity of Nrsingadev carved by him. I've got a nice deity of Lord Caitanya carved by him. So his family service for many generations is to make the ropes for Jagannath, ropes which, as was mentioned in the pastime, the very strong but very soft ropes for carrying the deity. And then others have other services too, making the pots, etc. So everything's centered around Jagannath. And this is, how do we open this thing again? How do we open this? Thanks. So I will read a little bit more about this, but that was just a little bit of the appearance of Lord Jagannath. Katakadaita kari skanda alambana, katakadaita dari Sri Padma Charana. While carrying the deity of Lord Jagannath, some of the deities took hold of the shoulders of the Lord and some caught his lotus feet. Katitati bada drida stula pata dori, dui diki daita gana utaya tahadari. The Lord Jagannath deity was bound at the waist by a strong, thick rope made of silk. From two sides, the deities caught hold of this rope and raised the deity. Ushadrida tuli shaba pati stani stani, ekatuli haiti twaraya ara tuli te ane. Strong, puffed up cotton pads called tulis were spread out from the throne to the car, and the heavy deity of Lord Jagannath was carried from one pillow-like pad to the next by deities. So this is still the same way it goes on, many, many hundreds of years later, the same way of transferring the deities from the temple onto the chariot. Prabhu Padagate Tuli Haya Kanda Kanda Tula Saba Udi Yaya Shabda Haya Prachanda. While the deities carried the heavy Jagannath deity from one pad to the next, some of the pads broke and the cotton contents floated into the air. When they broke, they made a heavy cracking sound. Vishwambara Jagannathe Kecha Laite Pare Apana Ichaya Chali Karite Vihari. You can shut the door now if anyone's cold. Lord Jagannath is the maintainer of the whole universe, who can carry him from one place to another. The Lord moves by his personal will just to perform his pastimes. And sometimes that happens, that the chariot moves, so the devotees are thinking they're pulling the chariot, but if the Lord decides to stop the chariot, it stops and it can't move no matter how many people try to pull it until the Lord decides. Not long ago we spoke about that pastime of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's son, who later on he was what was his name as a child? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Bimal Prasad. So Bimal Prasad, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was born to Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his wife, who was named Malini. Is it Malini? Don't think it is. Anyway, is it Bhagavati Devi Dansi? And so he was praying for a ray of Vishnu. He was praying for someone who would continue Lord Chaitanya's mission in the Parampara. Bimal Prasad was born. And when the chariot came by their house, at that time Jagannath Puri wasn't built up like it is now. It was, so the chariot stopped before their house, and the Lord gave his darshan to Bimal Prasad, and the garland fell off the deity of Jagannath onto Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And then, after that, the chariot moved. Prior to that, they couldn't move the chariot. Mahaprabhu Manima Manima Karidvani Nana Vadya Kulahali Kichui Nashuni. When the Lord was transported from the throne to the car, tumultuous sounds were made on various musical instruments. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was chanting Manima, Manima, but he could not be heard. Purport: the word Manima is used to address a respectable person in Orissa. Lord Jagannath was being respectfully addressed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this way. It's interesting, Srila Prabhupada says, so just like in English language, if we approach somebody respectfully, if it's a male, we may say, "Sir, my dear sir." And Srila Prabhupada says, if we have some problem, we can go to Lord Nityananda and we can say, "My dear sir, I have this problem, please help." So here we see Lord Chaitanya respectfully, very respectfully approaching Lord Jagannath, saying, "Manima, Manima." Tabi prata parudra kari apane sevana suvarna marjani lana kari pata samarjana. While the Lord was being carried from the throne to the car, King Prataparudra personally engaged in the Lord's service by cleansing the road with a broom that had a golden handle. So this is significant because the king, who is said to be the head of all the citizens, he's actually the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're not simply meant to be enjoying the fat of the land, so to speak. They're not meant to just be taxing people and enjoying it like some kind of despot. But actually, they're taking the position of the Supreme Lord, and therefore, someone who does this properly, they have a very, very strict program. They get up early, they have strict sadhana, worshipping the deity, chanting japa, following regulative principles, etc. This is the proper king, proper leader. And therefore, they are to be given great honor. But because he's the representative of the Lord, when the Lord comes, then immediately he gives all respect to the Lord. So he's demonstrating that he is subservient to the Lord by sweeping the road in front of him. And sometimes we do this even in the West. We invite the mayor of that particular city to come and sweep. We see that quite often in Leicester. The mayor of Leicester will come and sweep the road in front of Jagannath. I'm not sure if they do it in London, but they certainly do it in other places where, like, perhaps chief politicians and chief leaders will come and sweep the chariot in front of the deity. And this is a very nice example showing that they're humbling themselves before the Lord. They may have such big responsibility or big post, but they're simply humbling themselves in front of the Lord. And even if they're doing it without really knowing behind it, then still they're getting that great benefit. And people are very enthusiastic to pull the ropes of the chariot. Can anyone say why? Yeah, liberation. Yeah. And also it says that if you're crushed by the wheel of the chariot, you get instant liberation. So this is actually a bit of a problem in Jagannath Puri, because historically people would be throwing themselves under the wheels. So they have these guards all around the wheels to make sure that people don't do that, because some people are so staunch in their faith that they think, Jai Jagannath, and they take a dive. I said Jai Jagannath, not Die Jagannath. So of course this is not something which is encouraged, but the general thing is that if you die in the presence of the deity, then you get a liberation. Like everyone that took part in that Kurukshetra battle, they were liberated. So, but it's not necessarily up to us to decide to do that. That's by the Lord's will. We shouldn't be choosing that to do that ourselves. The Lord gives us a certain amount of time, which we should live out and engage in His service. And when He decides, then we can go. Chandana jalete kare patane shichane tucha seva kare vasi raja simhasane. The king sprinkled the road with sandalwood-scented water. Although he was the owner of the royal throne, he engaged in menial service for the sake of Lord Jagannath. And this is a very important point here, that even if someone becomes a devotee, or they wish to become a devotee and they want to get initiated, then it's part of the UK, at least in the UK initiation standards, that they have to engage in some menial temple service. So no matter how big a person they happen to be, then they have to be willing to accept some menial service, so that they are not just given initiation as some kind of reward for a big donation or for having their famous face plastered around the place or something. So we're all equal before the Lord in that respect. So as an example, the devotee should take it that nothing's below them. Everything is for the Lord, so we can do any service for the Lord. This is what Vaishnava means. Uttama hana raja kare tuja sevana ataiva jagannatera kripara bhajana. Although the king was the most exalted, respectable person, still he accepted menial service for the Lord. He therefore became a suitable candidate for receiving the Lord's mercy. Mahaprabhu Sukha Paila Se Seva Dekite Mahaprabhu Kripa Mahaprabhu Kripa Haila Se Seva Haite. So this is the verse that Raghunath asked me to speak about. So I won't speak about it too long because class is about finished. It's just there's so much to say about Jagannath. If we want to engage in some more Jagannath Leela, we can do some more later. Upon seeing the king engage in such menial service, Caitanya Mahaprabhu became very happy. Simply by rendering this service, the king received the mercy of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Unless one receives the mercy of the Lord, he cannot understand the Supreme Person of Godhead or engages in devotional service. Tapi te deva padambuja dvaya prasada le shanugrita evahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko pi chiram vichinvan. Bhagavatam 10, 14, 29. A devotee who has received even a small fraction of the mercy of the Lord can understand him. Others may engage in theoretical speculation to understand the Lord, but they cannot know anything about him. Although Maharaj Bhattaruda was very eager to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord refused to see him. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the king engage in menial service for Lord Jagannath, he became very happy. Thus the king became eligible to receive Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. The devotee accepts Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the universal Guru and Lord Jagannath as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He is benefited by the combined mercy of Guru and Krishna. So Krishna and Guru. This is stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his instructions to Rupa Goswami, C.C. Maja 19151. Brahmande Brahmate Konya Bhagavana Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhaktilata Bij. The seed of devotional service fructifies and becomes a transcendental creeper. Finally, it reaches the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual sky. This seed is obtained by the mercy of the Lord and the Guru. By the Lord's mercy, one gets the association of a bona fide Guru, and by the mercy of the Guru, one gets a chance to render devotional service. Devotional service, the science of Bhakti Yoga, carries one from this material world to the spiritual world. Caritamrta Gananjana Slakaya Chakramilitamina Tasmashi Grivid Maha Kamguruti Vachalam Pangamalaga Tegrimya Kripata Mambande Shigrimin Sarnam Janshi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Upon seeing the king engaged in such menial service, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became very happy. Simply by rendering this service, the king received the mercy of the Lord. So this is first point made here is that a little devotional service is actually much more valuable than a lot of theoretical speculation, because by devotional service, then we can understand the Lord. Simply by reading about the Lord, we can understand. We can find out about the Lord, but to understand and to make that connection through bhakti, then there has to be some devotional service. Srila Prabhupada said that love is something which has to be demonstrated. It's not just a feeling. And devotional service means it's authorized. It's not that we just make our own idea of what it is. Therefore, this parampara is engaging us in devotional service. And this is how we receive the mercy of the Lord, through that mercy which has been handed down. The service has been handed down. It's not that we don't do any devotional service until Krishna himself personally comes and tells us, okay, I want you to do this. He's already personally telling us, be the devotee of my devotee. So this is the situation for all of us. We're all trying to be a devotee of Krishna's devotees. And there's many devotees that we can be inspired by. I was just speaking with Ramananda Prabhu the other day. We're discussing where we find some sources of inspiration. And I was saying that one day I was feeling uninspired, and I realized it was actually just because of lack of hearing and chanting. So I made the, the endeavor that day just to give that day to, because I was actually on a break at the time. So just hearing, I went on to YouTube and I was hearing these small, short classes between 4 to 7 minutes of Srila Prabhupada talking. And then I went on to similar short talks by Shivaram Swami, and then Satyanandan Swami and Raghunath Swami, and I just couldn't stop listening. It was amazing. In fact, I didn't have to listen to so many to get inspired. It was like practically by the first one, I was feeling like revived. I was brought back to life again. And I was just feeling so enthused, I just wanted to hear more and more. And it made me realize that whenever we feel uninspired, it's just simply because we're always listening to something. It's like some people say, I'd like to learn to meditate. We're always meditating. There's always something going on in mind. It's like we're meditating on prasadam just now because this idiot's still talking. And it's, I know the feeling. I've sat there listening to idiots talking in prasadam times there. But not that they were idiots. I was the idiot because I didn't have the taste. But anyway, I'll just finish up quickly, just a couple of minutes. Don't want to put in devotees in anxiety. But I realized that, so meditation, there's always something going on in the mind which we're thinking of. We're maybe meditating on how we're going to pay our bills. We're meditating on how we need a pair of shoes. Or there's something going on in the mind. There's always something occupying that space of the mind. So what we're doing is just putting Krishna in there. Krishna's service, Krishna's devotees, any aspect related to Krishna. And the more we try to do that, then the more we'll become inspired. So if we feel uninspired or unenthused, it's simply because we're doing something which is unauthorized. And it might even be that we're sitting reading all day while there's other important things to get done. And Krishna's not giving us that inspiration because it's not what he wants, but we want it. But Krishna's saying, you can, there's other things to be done. If you really want to know me, then you have to do devotional service. So this Anya Bilasi Tashunyam Gana Karmadyanavitama Nakulyana Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Uttama devotional service performed favorably without any desire for fruit of gain or mental speculation, some fame, distinction, adoration of gain. We shouldn't be looking for some fame out of devotional service. this is a subtle sex life. We want to be distinct. We want to be distinguished because of our vast learning or because of how great a devotee we are. And so there's many stories of Krishna where Krishna doesn't like it when the devotees become proud. There's a couple of things that spring to mind that Krishna doesn't like. He doesn't like it when the devotees fight with each other. He doesn't like that. And he doesn't like it when the devotees become proud. And even his topmost devotees, the gopis of Vrindavan, sometimes when they feel a little proud in the rasa dance, thinking that Krishna is dancing with me only, because when they would see that Krishna is only dancing with them, it would seem like that, then they might become a proud, and then Krishna would leave the rasa dance, so they would hanker for him, and they'd realize, oh, I was proud, I shouldn't be like that, So same with us, we should always count our blessing, and this way we remain appreciative. We take things for granted, that we go into material consciousness. So Maharaj Prabhupada, although he had such great facilities, he wasn't taking it for granted. He was always seeing himself as a servant of the Lord, and he was always eager to get the Lord's association. But because the Lord considered him a pounds, shilling, and pence man, this is what Prabhupada says in one of the other purports, then Lord Caitanya wasn't keen to see him because he was a crorepati, a wealthy man. But Maharaj Prabhupada, and the Lord was setting this example, although he knew he was a great devotee, he was setting this example that sannyasis shouldn't, and devotees shouldn't simply be eager to accept association of people because of the material standing. And it was only when Maharaj Prabhupada pleased Lord Caitanya by this humble service, he humbled himself in front of the whole city by sweeping the road. And it's not like we have tarmac roads here, there was a dust road. So in this way, he got the mercy of the Lord because of his humble service. So this is his example that we follow. And it says here that even a small fraction of the mercy of the Lord can allow us to understand him. And the theoretical understanding cannot match even a little bit of the mercy of the Lord. So we'll just stop there if anyone's got any questions or comments. If not, then we'll just say Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Caitanya Caritamrta ki, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki, Iskon Gurvinda ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Gaur Bhaktavrinda ki.